Most of the time, when people are working to communicate their ideas to an audience, what they do is they conceive a thought in their mind, they write it down, they polish it, they perfect it. But there's one thing that they forget to do. Can you think of what that is? There is a fundamental gap in what they are trying to do. In their minds, the thought that they have conceived and the way they write that thought, it is more of an essay. So what is missing is that connection with their audience. Hi, my name is Taruna Ramani, and what we're going to be talking about today is how to engage with your audience. I just talked about the gap. Have you ever been to San Francisco? If you have, I'm sure you've seen the Golden Gate Bridge and how beautiful it is. I want you to visualize it because that bridge, it connects the city of San Francisco to another part of California. When you are preparing your speech, it is very important, whether you're doing an informative speech, whether you're doing a persuasive speech, a demonstrative speech, or an entertaining speech, it is extremely important that you bridge the gap between your thoughts and your audience. My first suggestion to you is to be the real you. Talk about topics that you are passionate about. Because when you are passionate about something, you are more natural in the way you speak. So it is very important that you talk about topics that you are passionate about. And when that happens, you are definitely connecting with your audience in the way that you want to connect with them. There are so many facets to each one of our personalities. Bring in those facets into your speech. Just because you're doing a boardroom presentation, you do not need to be dry, drab, stoic. Because then you will definitely lose your audience. So don't hesitate to bring in your facets of your personality to your speech. Do you know that we tend to trust people more when they use hand gestures? So next time when you are talking in front of people, be mindful that your arms are not hanging loose by your sides, that you are engaging your audience with your hand gestures too. Let me share some very simple, doable hacks about hand gestures. If you want to be seen as likable, trustable, keep your palm open like this. If you want to be seen as someone in control, put your palm facing down when you speak. It's a simple hack and it comes with practice. The other thing that I want you to keep in mind when you're using your hands is, when you're speaking in front of a bigger audience, it's very important that your hand gestures are bigger too. The bigger the size of your audience, the bigger your hand gestures should be. Suppose if you're speaking in front of an audience and if you're asking them a question and you say, raise your hands if you think that New Jersey is a great place to live in. By the way, I live in New Jersey. So if you're asking a question like that, raise your hand too. And if you are asking a question, raise your hand for both alternatives, which means you could go something like this. Raise your hands if you think that New Jersey is a great place to live in. And now raise your hands if you think New Jersey is not a great place to live in. Use your hands. Do that gesture. And again, when you're speaking in front of a big audience, let your hand gestures be big too. Another great way to draw your audience in is to use vocal variety. Alter your pace, your pitch, your tone, your volume, and see how your audience gets engaged. Can you imagine sitting in an audience and listening to that same monotone throughout a speech? No, right? If you don't want to suffer like that, why should your audience suffer? So I always say to people that when I am speaking one-on-one, my pitch is different. And when I'm speaking in front of an audience, I always use a one step up pitch. I base my speech. It's important. When you're talking excitedly about something, go fast. When you want to talk about something dramatic, go slow. Let your audience feel what you say. Increase the volume. Keep these things in mind. And another very important thing that people normally ignore is the power of a pause. Literally, that 3-second pause makes a dramatic difference in your delivery of speech. When are those times that you should be using the pause? Firstly, if you are a fast speaker, you should pause in between time to time to let your audience catch up with your thoughts. The other times that you should be using the pauses when you're transitioning from one thought to another. Pause. Before you're speaking something important, pause. After you've spoken something important, pause to underscore the relevance of what you just spoke. So, it's very important to use the power of a pause and to use a vocal variety when you speak. If you want to alter the dynamics of your presentation in a good way, it's very important to choose the right vocabulary too, because it creates a shift in your presentation and keeps your audience engaged too. Look at your script. Are there any mundane words, any ordinary words that you could switch? If you can, do that. There are two things that are going to happen. One is it's going to elevate the level of your speech. Second is it creates a visual in your audience mind. Think about this. If I am adding a story to my presentation, a narrative, and if I'm saying that I walked out of my room, you don't feel much. If I were to say I raced out of my room, it's creating a visual in your mind. I tiptoed out of my room. It's creating a different visual in your mind, right? So look for those synonyms that are better than the mundane words that you are using. Now, another important thing that you could do is use the power of repetition. Do you remember our ex-president Barack Obama's that famous New Hampshire primary speech where he used the phrase, "Yes, we can"? Do you see how energized the audience was? How many times Barack Obama used the phrase, "Yes, we can"? There was a power in the repetition of that phrase. In that same way, Martin Luther King's speech, "I Have a Dream," he used the phrase, "I have a dream" 8 times. And there was power in that repetition. So, if you want to drive home a point to your audience, use the power of repetition, especially in those key moments, or to bring home a key thought. Try using power of repetition and use power words in your vocabulary. Another thing that I want you to keep in mind is that it is important to remove all jargon from your presentation. Look at your script. Is there anything there that your audience will not understand? Are there any acronyms that they will not understand? Any buzzwords that they will not understand? Any jargon that they will not understand? If you have that, remove that from your speech. Because if your audience does not understand what you say, how can they be engaged with you, correct? For that great presentation, for that high audience engagement, it is very important that you focus on your energy too. It is very important that when you're speaking to your audience, even you speaking in high energy, your audience will get exhausted if there are no breaks in between. So focus on an energy shift. You're talking about something very important. Take a pause. Ask questions to your audience. That changes or shifts the energy too. When you're giving statistical information versus when you're doing a narrative, let them a different energy. When you're sharing something disturbing, you cannot be using the same energy that you use for sharing something great, right? So pace yourself, use pauses, engage your audience through questions, and keep shifting your energy level so that your audience is engaged. My last tip to you is that be spontaneous. Yes, you have a script. Yes, you have a message that you want to bring across, but if there is something happening in the audience, make it your business to know about it and bring it into your conversation or your speech. You know what will happen? You will create a moment with your audience and they will appreciate that you are flexible and that you are not doing a rehearsed speech. And what a great way to engage your audience, correct? So use the tips that I shared and I know that you will have a greater audience engagement. And lastly, fuel the power of your communication for the success that you truly deserve.